Live from our 7 Tasmania studios, your nightly news with Peter Murphy begins now.
The state's Holden fans are in mourning today following the company's announcement to call it quits in Australia. The decision to ditch the brand is set to put a major dent in the local car industry.
It's one of the most iconic Holdens ingrained in the minds of Tasmanians. The 1974 Green Monaro HQ GTS left dangling off the Tasman Bridge in 1975. It now proudly sits in Tasmania's Automobile Museum as a reminder of the horrors that unfolded that day.
Probably Tasmania's most famous Holden.
The museum has a strong collection of locally owned Holdens from across the decades, including one of Peter Brock's famous Tirana racing cars. The humble Holden showcasing the island state in this 1950s ad.
There's rare beauty in blossom time in Australia's Apple Isle. And there's rare beauty too in Holden, Australia's own car.
Holden's announcement today has hit enthusiasts hard, signalling the end of an era.
Holden's been a massive part of our identity for a long time. It was football, meat pies, kangaroos and Holden cars, and it's always been Kingswood country, and yeah, it's a pretty sad day when you lose a part of your own identity as a nation.
It's a sign of the times, I'm afraid, with things changing with electric cars coming and fuel cell cars, and it's going to be a whole different landscape in the next 20 or 30 years.
Motors Tasmania has 4 dealerships in the state.
Well, Motors is the sole dealer for the Holden product. I don't know how they will manage that. They have been, like all Holden dealers, suffering reduced sales over recent years.
But the Tasmanian Automobile Chamber of Commerce is confident Holden owners will be looked after.
Holden will support their warranties and any recalls and any service work through the dealers.
As for the Holden-Ford rivalry,
the whole Holden and Ford thing has been, part of our lives for so long, and effectively that's over now. But I think the enthusiasm for the brand will live on for a long time.
Letitia Wallace, 7 Tasmania News.
There's a new plan to divert untreated water from the River Derwent to help prop up farming in the state's southeast. Irrigation in the region had been restricted due to dry conditions, but a new pipeline would bypass the limits of a Tas water treatment plant.
Walking through a barren pasture, a familiar sight for this Tasmanian vegetable farmer.
The drought's just got worse and worse and worse. And while we're down here in Tassie, we can say, we're a bit immune from that, but guess what, we're not.
But relief may be on the horizon, with a new approach on offer to aid existing and new irrigators on Tasmania's dry east coast.
We have a solution to the southeast interim scheme, and that's to deliver surety of water, reliable water through to the southeast stages 2 and 3 to some 250 irrigators.
We're having to adapt under pretty dry conditions, and as time goes by, we're experiencing drier and drier conditions, and for us to continue that, we need this expression of interest to be rolled out to provide for the next generations.
It comes amid recent water restrictions in the region, reaching stage 3 further north, with the southeast interim solution aiming to develop pipes to pump untreated water from the River Derwent, instead of taking it from the limited drinking water supply.
Removing us from the Taswater drinking water supply, and therefore taking a fair amount of stress off that drinking water supply and freeing up 30 megalitres a day back into that supply in times when there's increased demand.
Expressions of interest opened today, seen as a positive step forward by many landowners.
If we've got irrigation, then we've got surety of crops. So there's huge potential in this valley to take it further.
The project is expected to be running in 3 to 5 years. Rebecca Main, 7 Tasmania News.
Calls continue for more federal assistance to aid the state's tourism industry amid rolling travel bans to prevent coronavirus. The sector has previously reported concerns for operators who rely heavily on Chinese visitors.
We've got a $76 million fund which is assisting tourism, but we will monitor and see what needs to be done on a day-by-day basis.
But the Tasmanian Greens say it shouldn't come from the taxpayer's pocket.
It's hard to see how they could justify taking more public money in this regard. They're already a heavily subsidised industry. Take a reality check and look at the other threats that today are affecting tourism operators.
Restrictions on foreign nationals travelling from China were extended last week. Police are investigating a house fire in Gagebrook overnight that's believed to have been deliberately lit. Fire crews were called to a Bond Place property around 2 this morning after multiple reports of smoke and fire coming from the premises. 5 trucks took 25 minutes to extinguish the blaze, with crews staying overnight to monitor the situation. Damage is estimated at around $80,000. A pedestrian has been hit by a car in Hobart's CBD. Emergency services were called to the corner of Barrack and Bathurst Streets around midday following reports of a collision. A woman was taken to hospital for treatment of non-life-threatening injuries. Police directed traffic in the area until the scene was cleared. After almost a decade in the works, Tasmania's newest luxury hotel is nearing completion and is set to welcome guests by the end of the year. The Parliament Square project will provide a much-needed boost to the number of hotel rooms, but as our tourism sector continues to soar, other states are looking to steal our tactics.
It's an impressive sight from the top floor of what's soon to be a luxury hotel. This build an all too familiar sight in Hobart, but the Parliament Square project is finally nearing completion.
The air conditioning's going in, the wiring's going in, the plumbing's already in largely, the glass is in and the roof's on. So, we're on the home straight.
It's still a busy construction site, but the Marriott's newest hotel, the Tasman, will open its doors in December, offering 152 suites. Much needed as demand for rooms outstrips supply.
They're absolutely needed, and around 1,000 are going to come online over the next 12 to 18 months.
It'll look amazing. It'll be a lot of energy, a lot of hustle and bustle, a lot of people coming to see what this brand is about.
The project was initially planned to contain retail and office space, but amid a lift in tourism, they added a hotel.
That's been developed on the run, so to speak, as Hobart's become so popular with tourists.
But our tourism growth is the envy of other states, and the South Australian Premier is borrowing some ideas. He says he wants a landmark museum like Mona and a festival like Dark Mofo to boost winter visitation, as well as more nature-based tourism.
Why wouldn't any other state and territory in the country want to be Tasmania at the moment? We've had 1.32 million visitors come to Tasmania, and they're spending nearly $2.5 billion into our economy.
That boom making hotels like this one more in demand than ever before. Michelle Wisby, 7 Tasmania News.
The Premier says he's keeping a close eye on the trouble-plagued Royal Hobart Hospital redevelopment as its next deadline looms. The government originally promised to have movement within the new K block by this month, a commitment Peter Gutwin says he's planning to keep. But with the project facing delays, issues with staff payments, asbestos and claims of lead in the water, he wouldn't reveal whether he's considering action under existing contracts.
The state will obviously ensure that its rights under the contract are maintained and protected, and that we'll exercise any contractual arrangements that we need to.
He says the government will not accept a hospital that's not fit for purpose. A New Caledonian tourist has been rescued from a walking track near Mole Creek. Police say the 51-year-old became disoriented while doing a day walk alone on the Higgs track at Western Creek yesterday. Emergency crews attempted to give the woman instructions over the phone to help her relocate the track, but it was unsuccessful. The Westpac rescue helicopter airlifted her to Deloraine. Police are reminding people doing bushwalks to be prepared and let someone know their intended route. It escorted countless ships and helped train a generation of seafarers here in Tasmania. But the once proud MV Yuna is now a home for seagulls. A group of passionate volunteers is still holding out hope that the old maritime college vessel will be saved.
Anchored in limbo between Bell Bay and Beauty Point, Australia's last pilot cutter, the MV Yuna, cuts a lonely figure in the Tamar River.
Well, if we don't do something with it soon, she's deteriorating. And to see a ship deteriorate in such a grand old ship as she is.
Built in the 1950s, it served visiting vessels to Victoria's Port Phillip Bay. Afterwards, she joined the Australian Maritime College to train seafarers.
I reckon at the time she was an envy of many countries, actually, as a merchant navy training vessel.
Decommissioned in 2004, the Western Port Oberon Association floated a plan to turn it into a school camp in 2016.
Unfortunately, we sailed down the river expecting to go to Melbourne, and the berth that was supposedly organised disappeared, so we ended up stranded.
The Yuna has floated idly in the Tamar ever since. Max Cassidy began working on the ship in 1982. He's now a volunteer caretaker, watching it slowly deteriorate.
The Oberon Association want me to look after it here, yes, as best I can. But I'm only one person, and what I need is volunteers.
The Oberon Association hopes to berth the Yuna here at Beauty Point to carry out maintenance before the vessel one day sails to Victoria. The group is still in talks with Tasports. But until those talks are resolved, she'll stay put in the river, while her owners still search for a harbour in Victoria.
Which is a bit of a shame, really, because she's a grand old lady, and here she's rusting away a bit now.
Volunteers like Max will just have to wait for the tide to turn. Sean McComish, 7 Tasmania News.
The Blackmun's Bay news agency, damaged by an out-of-control car yesterday, is back in business. It reopened this morning with damage to the front of the shop boarded up. The owner says loyal customers were supportive of him and his staff throughout the day.
I'm offering any help that's required, and I don't really have an answer for them yet because I don't really know what's required until the insurance comes. So, yeah, but everyone's been really nice about it all.
The business is running limited operations with half the shop closed off due to the damage. It ruled the air at the start of World War I. Now a famous French fighter plane is returning to the sky over Tasmania. The Replica Newport 11 has taken 7 years to build and even survived a crash landing.
It was the symbol of French resistance during the Great War, flying fearlessly into dogfights over the European theatre. This modern take on the Newport 11 reveals a glimpse of what it would have been like.
You fly it and it makes you understand just how brave those fellas were.
Despite the primitive protection and exposure to the freezing cold, the design was cutting edge at the time. Max Williams has spent 7 years building the Replica biplane, complete with its own coat of arms, and true to history, its weapon crowned on top.
Operated from the cockpit, even though it's on top of the wing, the cable went down and they could fire it from inside.
Even a mid-air mishap hasn't dented Max's passion. On one flight, the engine failed after takeoff, but luckily, the 84-year-old managed to land safely.
Any landing you walk away from's a good one, that's the saying.
He's hoping for a smoother ride this weekend when the plane goes on show at the Georgetown Wings and Things.
Once you take a flight in a small aircraft like these, most people are hooked. They're hooked straight away. They start taking lessons. And that's the end of you. You'll be a pilot for the rest of your life.
And you might be hooked too at Sunday's event at Georgetown Airport. Tom Johnson, 7 Tasmania News.
Limited operations have returned to the Henty Gold Mine as authorities continue the recovery mission for Cameron Goss. Pybar Mining Services says progress has been made to locate the body of the 44-year-old. In a statement late today, the company said some operations had returned to another section of the mine with the approval of the coroner and regulator. It added there was a solid plan for the future of the site following the retrieval of Mr Goss. Tasmanians are being praised for their generosity after another significant local donation towards the Red Cross bushfire appeal. Hill Street Grocer handing over more than $40,000 this morning after smashing a fundraising target in less than a week.
We just couldn't get over how quickly we raised it, and I guess that goes to show how generous Tasmanians really can be.
It was a fantastic result, and it's amazing what the power of, networks can bring.
Customers donated around $20,000 at the till, with the company matching it dollar for dollar.
Good evening. 19 in Hobart and Burnie today. Launceston with the state's top of 24. Devonport reached a top of 20. Elsewhere it was 22 on Flinders Island. King Island, Smithton, Ouse, Strawn and the Friendly Beaches all 21. Lowhead 19, Lyweni cool overnight, -1 up to a top of 17 degrees today. On the satellite, low level cloud around parts of the east, southwest and Bass Strait. Further afield and low cloud along coastal New South Wales and eastern Victoria, middle level cloud through WA. Tomorrow a low and several surface troughs will cross Tasmania's north. A high will move into the Bight. A surface trough dominates much of the north-east and west coast fringes. Coastal waters and easterly winds at 10 to 20 knots, increasing to 30 knots about the north in the afternoon. Swells to 2 metres for the east, west and south. And with that, a gale warning is current for Banks Strait and Franklin Sound, and a strong wind warning also for remaining waters from Low Rocky Point to Wineglass Bay. Tuesday's forecast now: Hobart becoming cloudy 21, 20 for Adventure Bay, rain at times for Tarraleah 18 the top. Rain developing for the north, Launceston and Bridport both 22, 19 in Devonport. Burnie rain developing and 17, rain at times for Strawn tomorrow 21 and rain for Marrawar 18 there. Much the same for the east, St Helens 19, Swansea 21 and on Flinders Island, Whitemark looking a top of 21 degrees. The UV forecast still very high right across the state. To the 3-day forecast now, and rain about the northeast on Wednesday, easing in the afternoon with showers elsewhere. Thursday, light showers about the southwest and southeast, increasing to the west and south by evening. And finally Friday, fine about the north and east with showers elsewhere. Capital cities tomorrow: Perth fine and 34, Adelaide looking a top of 22, Melbourne showers and storms 24, Canberra and Sydney 30, Brisbane fine and 31 and a shower for Darwin 34 the top. And it's a sunny evening, 18 in Hobart, Launceston sitting on 21 and Devonport 18. Murph, that is the weather.
Thanks very much, Laura. And you said you were feeling a bit rusty. No problems there. And you've even forecast rain for the east coast. A brave move. That's all our news for now. I'll be back later with updates. Thanks for joining us. Good night.